All right. This chapter is a focus on small group and team communication. This is one of my favorite topics. You can really think about this in terms of your life in a lot of different contexts. You can look at your family as a team. You can look at your friendships as a team. You can look at your workplace as a team, the sports groups that you belong to, the student groups you belong to, the organizations in your community, like your church that you belong to. You can really take small group and team communication and the theories associated with it and really make sense of a lot of interactions that take place in the different groups that you personally belong to. So, what is small group communication? This takes place when there's three or more people working interdependently to accomplish a task. So, this is when a group is together. Each individual has their own responsibility and their own thing that they must accomplish, but each other team member depends on each other in order for that goal to actually be met, for that task to actually get accomplished. And there's six features that we consider and look at when we're studying small group communication or when we're thinking about small group communication. It's the group size, the idea of interdependence, task, norms, identity, and group talk. So group size. First, you need at least three people, maximum of 15. If it's more than that or less than that, it's not considered an actual small group. The ideal size in any kind of small group that's completing tasks is 5 to 7 members. You'll notice when you get out into the workforce and when you start working in jobs, some of you are going to end up in team-based work tasks, and they're typically going to be between 5 to 7 members assigned to each team and each task group. Interdependence, again, this captures the effects that group members have on each other, and one member's behavior influences all group members' behavior. We rely on each other interdependently. Each of us has our own responsibility, and we rely on each person accomplishing that responsibility in order for all the tasks of each individual to come together and ultimately lead to the completion or success of a goal or a task. And then the task activity has no external correct decision exists. This completion depends on member acceptance. So there's actually no externally correct decision. There's no objective saying this is the correct decision that needs to be made while working on these tasks. It's the group members that determine and basically construct what it is that the task is and what completion looks like. There's norms in small group communication. We've talked a little bit about norms in this class regarding culture. Well, small groups in themselves are kind of like a culture, and they have their own norms and identity. Norms meaning there's guidelines implemented by the group to regulate the members' behavior. There's rules and guidelines for how we're supposed to behave and how we're supposed to talk and how we're supposed to act. There's also identity. The group itself has an identity. This is the psychological, there can be psychological or physical boundaries. So this can be like we identify as the marketing team in our building or in our workplace or in our organization that we belong to, both psychologically because we know that we're marketing team members, but also physically because the marketing department has its own space within the office. And this distinguishes group members from non-group members. So we've talked about culture and co-culture. This is pretty similar. Small groups in themselves are cultures, and you create these boundaries, essentially an identity to determine who belongs to the group and who doesn't. And then there's group talk. There's specific types of communication group members use. You'll have certain types of jargon, phrases that only your group's going to understand. There's just different flows and different ways in which you're going to communicate when you belong to specific groups. A functional perspective of small group communication basically gets at the idea that a group's performance is directly related to how well members engage in each of the 5 communicative functions necessary to make an informed choice. This theory basically, the functional perspective basically gets at there's 5 communicative functions that group members must successfully engage in order to make an informed choice that's going to be beneficial to the group. And these 5 different approaches are these 5 different communicative functions include these 5 listed here. The first thing is whenever you're facing a problem or a task at hand that a group needs to accomplish, You need to first develop correct understanding of the issue. You need to make sure everybody on the team understands what it is that we're working with, what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and to make sure there's no ambiguity in the air about that so that everybody in the group is on the same page moving forward with accomplishing the task or fixing the problem. The next thing you need to do is determine the minimal characteristics required of any alternative needed to resolve the issue. What do we need in this group? What do we need people to do? What is it that is necessary in order to accomplish this task? Third, you want to identify an appropriate and unambiguous set of alternatives. So it's like, okay, we've come together and we thought this might be the best approach. Are there any type of alternatives? Are there any other approaches to accomplishing this task? Next thing you want to do is examine the alternatives identified in relation to the minimal characteristics established in the second step. So you're looking at all your alternatives, but you're coming back and saying, okay, well, this is what we need. This is absolutely what we have to have in order to get this done. Do any of these alternatives that we just come up with fit into that? And then you elect the best alternative in light of the previous 4 functions. So read about this. Make sure you understand the 5 communicative stages or the 5 communicative functional properties. So what are the advantages and negatives associated with working in small groups or becoming a part of small groups or working in a small group context? Well, you have access to group. It's basically collective resources is one of the biggest things. Each individual is going to come to the table with their own set of skills, with their own sets of abilities, and you can pool those together in small group work. You're going to have more time between each of you because each of you can kind of do your own thing within the same amount of time. You're going to have more energy. You're going to have more money. You're going to have more skill sets, all of these things. And there's also going to be diversity and there's going to be informational diversity. Again, each person's going to have their own background and their own perspective on stuff to offer to the table. There's differences provide group members with alternative views and perspectives. So again, you want to refrain from using your own personal values, beliefs, and attitudes as the basis for solving problems and making decisions. You want to consider everybody's personal values, beliefs, and attitudes so that those can all come together and ultimately help how you come up with the best solution or making a decision. And ultimately, there's going to be more creativity and idea generation. There's going to be new and different ideas. There's going to be solutions. There's going to be new products or goods that are created. It's going to be more creative. There's going to be more ideas generated because there's more brains at the table. There's more voices at the table. There's more room for opinions to be voiced and negotiated amongst the group. And a lot of this comes down to this nominal group discussion technique. And this is a decision-making procedure that allows members to work independently and as a member of the group. So this is when you offer group members a question or an idea or something. You give them a question. Each member kind of goes about their way and thinks about it and comes up with their own responses and their own opinions about it. Then you record the ideas of all the group members. Everybody puts theirs down. You comment on each other's ideas, you share your opinions about each idea, and then you vote and rank these ideas based on the group. So this is each individual has the ability to come up with their best idea. They get to put it on the table, and then as a group, you get to make a decision about what is the best idea. What is the approach we should take? What is the solution to our problem? How should we do this next step in creating this product or good or whatever it might be? But each individual gets their voice, and each individual gets to voice their opinion, and each individual gets to assess all the opinions of everybody in the group so that it's more fair and balanced. And then you get to make the decision as a group on what is the best idea or what is the best approach. There are, however, disadvantages of small group work. The first being not all people like working in groups. A lot of people hate working in groups. I'm sure some of you have had group projects in your classes and you hate it because you felt like you were doing the majority of the work while 2 of the 5 members basically slacked and didn't do a whole lot. This is what's called group hate. This is basically feelings of dread associated with group work. Some people just straight up do not like working in groups. Group member task coordination can be difficult, especially as size increases. It's difficult to increase. It's difficult to increase task coordination and making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do when there's so many pieces of puzzle in motion. Group member misbehavior is always a pain in the butt, and this relates to group hate and why a lot of people don't like working in groups. You often have slackers, people who fail to contribute what they're supposed to, and that can be very problematic in small group work. And then also timing and scheduling things that works for everybody is a huge problem and a huge disadvantage because it takes a lot of coordination. Um, Tuckman developed these stages of how small groups progress through these 5 sequential stages: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. I can almost guarantee you're going to see this again, and I can definitely guarantee you it's going to be a exam question. But basically, these are the 5 steps. Forming is the first step. It's when you're getting acquainted with the group and the task. You're learning who everybody is in the group. You're starting to just get to know to one another. You're just getting familiar with what it is that the group does, what it is that it's supposed to accomplish, what it is that it's supposed to set out as a goal. This is when there's a lot of rapport building and you're just getting to know one another and you're getting to get familiar with what your task is and what it is you need to do. The next step is storming. This is where you start idea generation. You start to talk with one another. You start to share your ideas. You start to come up with concepts and strategies and approaches to fixing things. Norming is where roles and norms set in. This is where you start working together on a task and there's rules and guidelines that you all just kind of start becoming familiar with. You all start learning the norms of the group and how the group functions, and you all create this together. You create these norms and roles and rules as the third step. Performing, this is where you focus on task accomplishment. You've got to the point where, all right, we're ready to start moving forward. We're ready to implement something. We're ready to put something into practice. We're ready to accomplish this task. We're ready to get these goals achieved. We're ready to start implementing things and doing things. And then the last step of adjourning, this is where the group reaches end of its involvement. You basically review everything that happened, you go over everything, you assess it, and that's basically the last step. Okay, we're done here, we don't need to do anything else. We accomplished our task either really successfully or not successfully based on the assessment. And then the group basically adjourns. You're no longer involved with those people, you're done. This team, this task, it's over for now. You start over again with a new one. Group member roles, there's always going to be 2 things that are continually balanced, and that's task roles and building and maintenance roles. And there's communicative behaviors that group members expect of each other in order for these roles to take place. Task roles is anything about facilitating group progress towards problem solving or decision making. This is the tasks at hand. What are you doing communicatively to accomplish those tasks and get those things done? But what's equally important is the building and maintenance roles. This is where you're communicating to develop and maintain interpersonal relationships in the group. If you focus strictly on task, you might get some stuff done, but you're going to piss people off. It's going to be a terrible experience. People are going to get mad at each other. There's going to be a lot of conflict, and it's not going to be smooth sailing. If you just focus on building and maintenance roles, though, and all you really care about is being friendly and making sure everybody gets along, you might not accomplish a whole lot on the task side of things. So we always are engaging in these communicative behaviors that focus on first getting the task done, getting things accomplished, making sure we are doing what we're supposed to do, but also at the same time we're having healthy, productive relationships in our group, and we're using our communication to maintain those interpersonal relationships. And there's a lot of different types of roles that people come together. There's the initiator and contributor, and this is basically the role of a group task leader. This is the person that focuses on these are the tasks we need to do, and this is how we need to get it done, and let's make sure that we get these things done. There's an information giver role that often develops, and this demonstrates the ability to provide and synthesize ideas and alternatives to and for group members. This is where your group might be in a position where they've all got a bunch of different ideas and they can't come to any kind of conclusion. An information giver is the type of person that can say, okay, I see the good parts of your idea, I see the good parts of your idea, I see the good parts of your idea. How can we come together on an agreement with all of this? And let me show you how we can come together on an agreement of this. There's an orientator. This person is usually responsible for challenging group members' ideas in a constructive manner. They kind of play devil's advocate sometimes and say, well, this is a good idea you have here, but have you thought of this? Oh, this is great, but how can we make it better? That type of person does that, and they try to be constructive in their feedback. There's a recorder. This is the person that takes the minutes of meetings and records any other type of group actions that need to be stored for permanent records. You have an encourager. This is the person that often recognizes the contributions made by the group members and communicates with them in a warm and supportive manner. It's the person that's basically your rah-rah cheerleader in a lot of ways. It's the person that's keeping people fired up and motivated. You have a harmonizer. This is the person that often mediates disagreements as they arise among the group members and attempts to relieve group tension. So all these different roles that we went over, they're not necessarily formal things that you're going to be prescribed. You're not going to walk into the workplace. You're not going to start any kind of task or team in your workplace and your occupation down the road, and your boss is going to say, okay, you're the harmonizer. Make sure that you mediate all the problems. Or, okay, you're going to be the encourager. Make sure you're the one providing support. Sometimes these things are going to be formally ascribed, like a recorder. Like sometimes you're the one that's going to be responsible for taking minutes at the meeting. But more times than not, these roles emerge naturally, and they're what's called informal roles. They're not roles that are explicitly on our job description, or roles that we're explicitly told this is what you're supposed to do. But these things emerge more naturally and informally in group communication and in group work. And leadership, too, is one of these things that often emerges quite naturally in small groups. It's shared leadership, and it's the notion that communicative behaviors that any member can enact to demonstrate leadership. Any individual in a group can show leadership. You do not have to be told that you're the boss or you're the manager or you're the leader to be a leader. We can engage in a lot of different communicative behaviors, and each of us can become a leader at different points in time depending on what is happening in that situation. This happens in two ways. It's the emergent leader approach. This is where group members are eliminated from leadership contention based on demonstration of leadership behaviors. Individuals that display more and more leadership are going to become the leaders in the group naturally, and those that just do not display leadership behaviors are going to kind of take the back seat and not become leaders. That way, leadership becomes emergent. Those individuals that have the leadership characteristics and abilities kind of emerge naturally as leaderships. Then there's into leadership roles. And then there's the counteractive influence approach. And what this basically gets at is when the group encounters an obstacle, one member uses communicative skills to resolve or remove it. It's individuals that can take problems and turn them into solutions. And this is another way in which leadership emerges. You're going to run into conflict anytime you're in a group. This is a process that occurs when group members engage in an expressed struggle. This is where we say, this is an issue. We're having a problem. We all know it's a problem. It's impeding our task accomplishment, and it often results because of real and perceived differences among group members, whether that's differences in opinions, differences in what they think is the right way to fix something, differences in thought processes. These types of conflicts happen all the time in small group communication. There's 4 types. There's substantive, effective, procedural, and equity types of small group conflict. I'm not going to go over those in great detail, but make sure you're aware of them and can define them from your textbook. But how do we fix conflict? How do we solve problems that emerge in our group communications? Group members basically need to use the appropriate conflict handling styles based on what the task is, who are the relationships with other members, and what are the parameters surrounding the tasks. So these are the things we need to always be considering when there's a conflict that arises. What's the task at hand? What are the relationships people have within this group? Do they get along? Do they not get along? Or is one a boss? Is one a subordinate? Whatever. And then what are the parameters surrounding the task? What are the rules and guidelines? And what's the scope of this task at hand? And there's 5 different conflict handling styles. There's avoiding, dominating, compromising, obliging, and integrating. So the way you can look at this and the way you can think about this is concern for your own needs and concern for other people's needs. And you can really kind of look at this as a chart, and you can look at this as a graph where you have concern for yourself on one axis and concern for others in the other axis, and this kind of determines how we handle conflict. In avoiding, you have low concern for your own needs and other needs. You completely avoid the conflict. You don't really care about it personally. You don't really care what other people think about it. You're just going to avoid it, and you're not going to do a whole lot. Dominating, this is where you have a high concern for yourself, but you don't really care about other people. When you're in a situation and there's a conflict, all you're thinking about is, okay, whatever outcome is going to be associated where I get the most benefit, where I get the most reward. I don't care about how this affects other people, but I'm focused specifically on how we can fix this conflict to where I get the most reward, to where everything works out great for me. Compromising is where there's a moderate concern for own needs and other needs. You're not overwhelmingly concerned about it, but you are concerned about it, but you're not just focused on yourself. You want to make sure that other people are going to come through this conflict on top. Other people are going to be all right. We're going to fix this problem so that everything is just fine for all of us. Obliging, this is where you actually put other people ahead of yourself in the group. You're willing to make sacrifices. You're willing to get the short end of the stick a few times as long as everybody else is going to be happy and it's going to be good for the group. And then there's integrating. And this is kind of the most appropriate or the most, I guess the most effective one in a lot of ways. This is when you have a high concern for your own needs and the needs of others. This is where you're saying, okay, I'm just as important as the group, but the group is just as important as me. We need to come up with a solution to this problem. We need to fix this conflict in a way that's going to be unbelievably beneficial for both me as an individual and the group as a whole.